Aaron Rodgers and the team have been at odds throughout the offseason. That has been the reports throughout the offseason. It has been, basically, if we go back in the timeline, April 29th is when it was reported that Aaron Rodgers was disgruntled with the team and didn't want to return to Green Bay. There were rumors about trades that night, which happened to be draft night. It was the NFL draft that night. Especially rumors that he was being traded to Denver, never materialized. Then there was just a lot of guessing. No real answer from Aaron Rodgers. No real answer from the front office of the Green Bay Packers. And then Monday, the Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy, they all meet with the shareholders over in Lambeau Field, and the same basically moments as they're speaking, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reports that Rodgers has told people he is returning to Green Bay. Adam Schefter of ESPN says they've redone his deal, made concessions to Rodgers, voided his last year of his deal, so he will return. Then today, Aaron Rodgers talks to the media at length for the first time in months. All he had really done was a quick interview with Kenny Mayne on ESPN, and then he was, golfing and did that little golf thing where he answered some questions at the match. But otherwise, it has been silence from Aaron Rodgers until today. And it's like everything had been building up to today because Aaron Rodgers had a lot to say today. So let's get into this. Basically, what I want to do is he talked for 30 minutes. I'm not going to play a 30-minute press conference straight because that would just get out of hand. There's no reason to just sit there and listen to him for 30 minutes. What I'm going to do is play clips, talk about what he said, contextualize it a little bit, give you my thoughts on it. I also want to hear your thoughts. If you watch the press conference today, if you listen to it, feel free to give me your thoughts at 715-453-4481. Your thoughts on Rodgers returning now to show up on the first day of training camp. Were you upset with him? Are you maybe on his side? Are you on the front office side? I'd love to hear your thoughts and open phone lines throughout here. As long as we aren't interviewing someone, open phone lines for you at 715-453-4481. But first, let's get into this. So Rodgers immediately asked basically, what's going on, Aaron? And this was his answer along with the question from the NFL Network's Tom Pelissero.
Aaron, what was this all about for you?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. I think, there was a lot of things that transpired. This wasn't, a draft day thing. This was started with a conversation in February at the season ended. And I just expressed, my desire to be more involved in conversations that directly affected my job. Also, I wanted to help the organization maybe learn from them some of the mistakes in the past, in my opinion, about the way that some of the outgoing veterans were treated, and just the fact that we didn't retain a number of players that I felt like were core players to our foundation, our locker room, high character guys. I'm talking about Charles Woodson, Jordy Nelson, Julius Peppers, Clay Matthews, Randall Cobb, James Jones, John Kuhn, Brett Good, TJ Lang, Brian Balaga, Casey Hayward, Micah Hyde, guys who were, exceptional players for us, but great locker room guys, high character guys. Many of them who weren't offered a contract at all, or were extremely lowballed, or were, maybe in my opinion, not given the respect on the way out that guys of their status and stature and high character deserved.
So we're a minute and a half into this, okay? And his first answer took nearly 6 minutes. And so we're going to break this down into 4 parts because really there are 4 parts to this. Basically what he says there, started a conversation in February, expressed his desire to have more conversations affecting his job, kind of try to help them to learn from their mistakes about how outgoing veterans were treated. And he listed off over 10 guys there. Obviously, Charles Woodson, Micah Hyde, Casey Hayward, so many that we've, that have gone, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson. And so he just lists them all off there. And he says they didn't retain a lot of high character guys. And basically, wants to, like I said, help them to learn from their mistakes, and the mistake being how outgoing veterans on the team were treated. So we get into the next part, and he takes us really through this whole timeline. He goes from February to March to draft to post-draft to summer. So let's get to the next part, and this is on talks. Talking about talks that were going on in late February, and talking about the commitment for just playing this coming season and how he wasn't getting that.
And then it kind of progressed from there into a commitment for the 2021 season and beyond. That really wasn't given at any time. So for me, I had to assess the situation, not necessarily wanting to be a lame duck quarterback, especially after an MVP season, which I think you can understand. And then the other part in February was wanting to be a part of conversations involving free agents, which has never happened in my career. I've trained with a number of NFL guys most of my career in the off seasons. My agency, Athletes First, has had a number of high draft picks over the years. I've tried to pass along information. Hasn't really been used, shall we say. So I wanted to offer up my services as a recruiter, and I think we can all understand, Green Bay isn't, a huge vacation destination. People are coming here to play with me, to play with our team, and knowing that they can win a championship here. And the fact that I haven't been used in those discussions was one I wanted to change moving forward. And I felt like based on my years, the way I can still play, that should be a natural part of the conversation.
So basically, he's saying he didn't have a commitment for 2021 and beyond. Didn't want to be a lame duck quarterback after an MVP season. I mean, it makes a whole lot of sense to me. Wants to be a part of the conversations regarding free agents. And he's tried to pass along info that he has, and it just hasn't been used. They've just kind of brushed him off. It sounds like, a lot of brushing off of one of the best to ever play the game. And I don't love that, how it comes, coming off at the outset. Like, if he knows, if he's been working out with players and he sees what they can add to the team, I think, why not at least give him a shot or at least hear him in those conversations? But it doesn't sound like that was happening. Also, part of that, they wouldn't even, he wasn't sure if he was going to be the Green Bay Packers quarterback this year. And that's not because of a personal issue. It's because the team hadn't told him that he was going to be the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers in 2021. So then the conversation changed a bit in March. Here's what Rodgers says happened in March.
As that progressed from that point, nothing really changed on that front. So we got into March, and the conversation changed. As I felt like if you can't commit to me past 2021, and I'm not a part of recruiting process and for agency, if I'm not a part of the future, then instead of letting me be a lame duck quarterback, if you want to make a change and move forward, then go ahead and do it. That obviously didn't happen. Like I said, it wasn't a draft day thing. There were conversations for a number of months leading up to that.
And obviously, draft day is when Adam Schefter came out with the big report that Aaron Rodgers wanted out. Now, you could say that technically he requested a trade there, right? Because if you think about what he said if you're going to move on from me now. Basically, that was his thing in March. And so, look, if you want Jordan Love to be the quarterback, who's currently the backup, if you want him to be your future, just move on from me now and let me go and finish my career somewhere else. And that was kind of his mindset then there in March, because if you're not going to commit to me, then just get rid of me. It was a lame duck meeting. He mentions, doesn't want to be a lame duck quarterback again. And that's meaning if they know they're going to go to Jordan Love next year, then why have, then he doesn't want to just sit there and be a placeholder in 2021, as he shouldn't need to be, because he shouldn't be a placeholder. This guy should be on the Packers for at least 2 to 3 more years. But that's a whole nother issue. But anyway, so he basically, you could say he requested a trade there. And so the next part gets even a little more wild, okay? Because they decide to start throwing money at Aaron Rodgers to try to please him in May, right? The draft is April 29th. So post-draft, obviously this all goes public, and they're like, oh no, the front office is like, we got to fix this somehow. And Rodgers basically is throwing money at him, and he reiterates again, this isn't about the money. Take a listen.
Post the draft, I think what basically happened was then they said, we'll give you some money now. Let's see if we can throw some money at you. I said from the start it wasn't about the money. Obviously, I didn't show up for the off-season program or mini camp. To me, it was bigger than this. It was about trying to be a resource for the organization that I care about and love so much. So when the money came at me, the other part is, the backstory to that is, after the season, there was a part of me that did think that there would be conversation about an extension. Based on my cap number this season, next season, it seemed natural based on the way I played to at least have a conversation about it. It wasn't a conversation. Not until into May. And that to me seemed like an analogy that you guys understand. You guys have a fantastic year at work. You write some great stories. You go to your boss and say, I just had an incredible year. I think I deserve a pay raise or, some security. And the boss says, let's just see how it goes. A couple months down the line, you get another job opportunity. You go back to your boss and say, hey, I got this amazing job opportunity. And say, whoa, no, we love you. We do want you to stick around. We do care about you. Just have the same feeling.
So you can totally relate to that last analogy, can't you? Like, think about this. That's it. So he put it in our terms. I'm going to put that in football terms. Basically, he went to the front office and said, can you commit to me for next year and longer? I just had an MVP season, and they said, we'll see. Fast forward to late March in the draft, and other teams are calling the Packers about a possible trade, and Rodgers is excelling on Jeopardy, and the team goes, oh, well, let's just throw some money at you. But as Rodgers said, he doesn't need any money. The guy wants to end his career in Green Bay or at least have a long-term commitment in Green Bay. That's what he wants, and the Packers won't give it to him. The Packers won't give it to him. But like he said, they all of a sudden tell you how much they love you once they see that there could be a door that you are going to walk out of. And that door being a possible trade that teams are starting to call about, or maybe a out-of-football career that people were talking about with Jeopardy. And then they start throwing money at him. And we talked a lot about this here on the Sports Queue, and you've probably heard it on other sports shows if you listen. It was about the almost certainty of the restructuring of Rodgers' deal to pay him more money in the future or delay the cap hit in the future to allow the team to do more in free agency this year. Because the Green Bay Packers were in quite a pinch with how little money they had to work with heading into this offseason, this past offseason that we just went through. There was very little money to work with for the Green Bay Packers. And Aaron Rodgers was getting a lot of money, and his hit on the what's called the salary cap, how much money you can spend until, was a lot. So people were like, well, obviously they could just restructure his deal, defer some money down the road, pay him more in the next 3-4 years, and restructure his deal so then they can pay more money out in free agency and continue to build this team into more of a contender and continue to be that Super Bowl contender that they want to be. But they didn't, and that's because this front office is so committed to Jordan Love after this 2021 season that they didn't even approach the subject for months. And they didn't even want to restructure because they don't want to commit to Rodgers longer than 2021. Just a wow moment. Rodgers himself said he was even expecting to be approached about it and wasn't until they said, okay, we'll throw some money at you. And a theme about all of this too, and this will keep coming up, how much he loves the Green Bay Packers and the organization as a whole. Now, he didn't go into I love the front office, but a quote in there was, quote, I was trying to be a resource for the organization that I love so much, end quote. The dude just wants to be a Packer for life or at least long term, and the front office just won't commit. But I digress. So then he talks about his summer and focusing on himself for the rest of the summer.
So, I said it wasn't about the money, and the way that felt, kind of just doubled down on that. Nothing really changed throughout the summer. There were obviously some developments in the last week or so, but I was really working on myself and my own mental state throughout the summer, and at various points deciding if I wanted to even keep playing. But the fire still burns, and I wanted to be on a football team, and we got some things figured out in the last few days, and I'm here.
So I think the biggest takeaway from that is that he contemplated retirement. And I did not think that Rodgers was going to retire at all. I mean, like he said, he still has that fire, and I was basically 100% certain he was going to play football, whether that was going to be in Green Bay or not. But I think just hearing him say that and that he contemplated retirement, he was pushed on that later in the interview, and he said, yeah, he thought about it, talked to people who were retired and asked how it was going, and kind of got a taste of what retirement life might be like. So he was really considering it. And also about that clip, I'd wonder what the details were of what happened in the last few days, because he said, some things changed in the last week that led him to report to camp. We never really got details on that, even in the entire press conference, but I'd be interested to hear what that was, and that would be a follow-up question maybe for a subsequent press conference for what changed in the last week specifically. Obviously, there's the reports that, his contract was negotiated a little bit, it was restructured a bit, meaning that, they gave him some concessions. They got Randall Cobb now was traded for and all of that, which we'll get into on the other side of the break. But still, what really changed over the last, week or so that allowed him to really get that, okay, I'm going to go play for the Packers. I'm going to report to training camp day one and play for the season. So coming up, we got to take a quick break, come back, more clips, and we'll get into basically, Randall Cobb has been traded for. Randall Cobb, who was a wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers from 2011 to 2018. He then went to the Texans. He's been there for 2 years. Now he's coming back to Green Bay on a trade, 6th-round pick heading to Houston. Randall Cobb coming to Green Bay. Green Bay is going to pick up about 2/3 of his salary. And basically, that was probably a Rodgers move. I don't think they do that if Rodgers doesn't request it. So how much leverage does Rodgers have, or how much input will Rodgers have as far as the personnel decisions go? And do you like that? We'll get into all of that coming up next on the Sports Cue.
Where northern Wisconsin comes for in-depth Wisconsin sports talk. From youth sports to the pros. You are listening to the Sports Cue with Hunter Baumgart on WJJQ.
I said we're going to talk about the Randall Cobb move and, Rodgers having some input on personnel moves. We're going to do that, but we're going to do that after we talk to Andy Herman at 6:05. So we're going to switch that around and talk about that at about 6:25. We're going to discuss the trade with Randall Cobb. And the fact that Rodgers had some input on a move that obviously the Packers made, and how much input will he have and all of that, because he got into all of that today. So we'll discuss that coming up. First, though, before we get to the news here, one of the big questions that I had going into this press conference today, and what I would have asked, was why Rodgers kind of strung us all along this offseason with dodging answers and not talking to the media. But he explained why that was today, and part of it was because this truly did come down in the last week, and he was contemplating retirement, etc., didn't know if he was going to show up, but also he respects the fans, city, and organization too much, he said, to kind of get into a public argument with them. And I respect that. So take a listen to Rodgers, why he kind of stayed silent throughout the offseason.
Look, I realize, there were times I could have said something, but I firmly believe that there is wisdom in silence, and also I love this city, this organization, and I didn't want to get into a pissing match with a team that's employed me for 16 years, paid me a lot of money. I felt like handling things behind closed doors was the right way to do it. There were some leaks for sure. I can promise you, I didn't have a part in any of those. My representation has assured me the same thing. I don't know what benefit would be given to me by releasing any details about a restructured contract for me, about leaking stuff on draft day. I don't understand the motivation behind that, but look, I believe that the right way to do it was to have conversations with those people, both in person, Zoom, on the phone, behind closed doors, as they say, and didn't want to get into an argument in the public with a team that I really care about.
So I just respect that answer, and I was not happy with Aaron Rodgers staying silent throughout the offseason, but I think getting into a public argument with an organization, I think if you have ties to that, who has like you said, paid you a lot of money, but also just has provided you employment for whatever it is, 17 years, I think you have to respect it. And now I know it would have been nice if he would have done all of this 3 months ago. But also 3 months ago, that was when they were throwing money at him. So this has really evolved over like 5 months. And so to get to this point, I don't think he would have said all of this in May. I don't think he would have went as far as he did today. And so the wait was kind of worth it in that respect. And I think it continues to show how much he respects the city and the fans. All right, this is what he said about still having the honor of being the Packers quarterback.
Well, Tim, it's still an honor. It's still something I'm very proud of. I did see something about Farvey and Bart playing 16 here, and this is obviously number 17, so there's something special about that. I've been here a long time. I've seen a lot of change in personnel and people in the building and the fields and the Hall of Fame and pro shop and cafeteria twice, weight room. It's been fun to be a part of the change. A lot of times, like at Cal, you move on and then everything gets better. It's been fun to see the facilities and everything get better and be able to be the quarterback here and see the south and north end zones, the way they got built up, and adding 8,000 fans to Lambeau. It's been fun to be a part of all the growth and those things. But yeah, this has always been a special thing for me to be the quarterback here, and I'm really thankful to be back here for a 14th season as a starter.
You could just hear the joy in his voice. This guy wants to be here long term, and the front office just won't commit to it.
What does Hunter have queued up next in the Sports Queue? Find out in moments on WJJQ.
The Packers make a move today, and they get a guy who they haven't had in a very long time, or at least in a couple of years, and that's Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb, wide receiver. He was with the Packers from 2011 to 2018. And was with the Packers for about 7 years and then moved on to Houston. And he's one of those guys that Rodgers was talking about when he talked about, the veterans and the Packers not letting go of the veterans nicely. And, just not, just on their way out, kind of being kicked to the curb, so to speak. And so he, obviously Cobb coming back is a big move as far as probably in Rodgers' eyes, because I think it was part of Rodgers coming back for this training camp. But Rodgers says it's bigger than that. It's not just about Randall Cobb. So take a listen. Rodgers' initial reaction to a question about Randall Cobb coming back.
Well, look, I'm really excited Randall's coming back. He's obviously a dear friend and a guy I still believe in that can really play. He falls into that category that I mentioned earlier of guys who left here, who were high-character guys. It's the desire that I've talked about before to finish as a Packer that's always been really important to me. And it's important to those guys as well. The guys I mentioned, I talked to the majority of them this offseason because I wanted to hear their experience and how they felt leaving the team and the way it went down. So I had all the information. And I think there's a sadness underneath it all. Obviously, there's a sadness when your career ends, but a sadness that things went down the way they went down. For a team that they cared about and loved and put their bodies on the line for so many years. So to get Randall back is really special. It's something that I talked about back in February, wanting to bring in a true slot receiver, which I thought would make our offense more dynamic, and I think Randall's a dynamic player. He has been when he's been healthy.
He is a dynamic player, and I think he will, I think he'll help this team. But it's interesting because, he says there he talked to a majority of the veterans that left the Packers, and most of them felt the same way, sad about how it left. And another, kind of takeaway here from Rodgers that his desire is to finish as a Packer. Rodgers doesn't want to end his tenure with the Packers like they did. And it really seems there's a theme here with the veterans and not being treated well on their way out. And Rodgers is hoping to avoid that and has been hoping to avoid that this whole time. But the team is stuck in its ways, and the front office continues to be stuck in its ways. And they just will not commit to him long term. Well, and are trying to, move on to Jordan Love, this young quarterback, next year. And in the meantime, doing what they've done with all the other veterans in the past and kick them to the curb, so to speak. So it's unfortunate. It really is, and the fact that Randall Cobb is coming to the Packers isn't, the end all be all for Aaron Rodgers, but it's a little bit of a step in the right direction. Now, Also, you may be a bit concerned about the quarterback of the team, having a big say in personnel decisions, and that's valid. Gutekunst is the GM. That's his job. However, this is Aaron Rodgers, and all he wants is input. This was an interesting answer. He was asked about when Matt LaFleur was hired a couple of years ago, and he wasn't consulted. If that is an example of what he's talking about when not being included in decisions, and he says that is just one example, but also goes into how other veteran quarterbacks have input, and so that leads him to think that he should too, and I tend to agree with him. Take a listen to this 2-minute clip.
I wasn't involved in those conversations at all. I had talked to Matt after the deal had already been in place to hire him as a coach. I wasn't part of that conversation. Let's just make that completely clear. I do love Matt, and we've had a blast together, and I'm glad he's here. But it's decisions like that have happened over and over and over again that make me realize that the organization looks at me and my job is just to play. In my opinion, based on what I've accomplished in this league, the way I care about my teammates, the way I show up in the locker room, the way I lead, the way I conduct myself in the community, you should tie myself to a little bit more input. The rules, are the same for most people, but every now and then there's some outliers, guys who've been in an organization for 17 years and won a few MVPs, where they can be in conversations at a different higher level. I'm not asking for anything that other great quarterbacks across the last few decades have not gotten. The opportunity to just be in conversation. So if you're gonna cut a guy who, based on a meritocracy, was our second best receiver in training camp last year for the majority of camp, maybe run it by me, see what I feel. I might be able to change your mind. But at least to be in a conversation makes you feel like you're important, you're respected. And that's what I tried to convey in February and for the first couple months. But no, it hasn't been that. That's just the way they do it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but objectively, there's been a lot of success here over the last 30 years. I just wanted to be a little bit more involved, and I understand that that's not the way it went.
It hasn't been the way it went, and it doesn't necessarily sound like it's going to be the way it goes either. And I think this answer is telling because he compares himself to other quarterbacks. We know Tom Brady basically went to Tampa Bay and helped build that team. Alex Smith, a veteran quarterback, came out and said, they talked to him when he was in Kansas City and they drafted Patrick Mahomes, who, of course, is now one of the best quarterbacks in football. When they were going to draft Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith said he was approached by Kansas City the entire time. He was like, okay, we're thinking about taking a quarterback. And he was kept in the loop the whole time, not something that the Green Bay Packers did with Aaron Rodgers. And other veteran QBs have definitely had input. And Rodgers has earned that. There is no doubt about it. 17 years with the Packers, 14th year heading into as a starter. The guy deserves at least to be in conversations. He doesn't have to make the final decision, but maybe a little bit of conversations, especially if that has happened in other places with other quarterbacks. Then he's like, I'm seeing what my colleagues are getting. Why aren't I getting that? And so that makes a whole lot of sense. He talks about cutting the second best wide receiver last year, Jake Kumaro, apparently. And he was obviously from Whitewater. And apparently he was really, really good. And listening to the end of that clip, it doesn't sound like Aaron Rodgers is going to be in on many decisions. He was also asked about having input, if having an input on personnel, and then we'll get to Tony Derleth here in a moment to talk about the Tomahawk Wrestling Golf Scramble fundraiser. But Rodgers was also asked about having an input and whether that is going to be a distraction to other players. Because if Aaron Rodgers is like, yeah, I want this guy, not this guy. Yeah, I want this guy, not this guy. That can divide a locker room real quick. Why does he want him and not me? Why, right? That can divide a locker room real quick. But this is what he was asked about having an input, if that was going to be a distraction, and he had a really short answer for it. Take a listen.
Chris, I don't see that as a distraction because I don't expect to be a part of those discussions. So I'm happy that Randall Cobb is here, and that's definitely something that I was hoping would happen, but I don't see that being a distraction.
So there you go. Doesn't see it being a distraction because he doesn't expect to be in the decision. So sure, he got his man in Randall Cobb, but I don't think the Packers are really giving him much. It sounds like as way of personnel decisions. So if you're super worried about your quarterback making those decisions, Doesn't sound much like Aaron Rodgers is going to have too much input. All right, we are going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Sports Queue, and we'll continue to keep you updated on the weather. We'll have a forecast update coming up next. You're listening to the Sports Queue on WJJQ. Also, Tony Derleth on the way next to talk Tomahawk Wrestling Golf Scramble Fundraiser.
Talking Packers, Badgers, Brewers, Bucks, and local sports. You are listening to the Sports Queue with Hunter Baumgart on WJJQ.